One of the things I'm going to do is highlight for you when we go in. On 8.3, you'll now notice, for those who are on it, that you now have contacts separately to a company. So what's worth noting here, if we go into a company, we find the company, we have a contact, we double click on the contact, that now changes to the contact screen, so the layout is slightly different. One of the major changes with this is that you can now have contacts who do not belong to companies. The concept here isn't to go into the business to consumer market, but we've had more and more customers over the years have been asking to be able to manage individuals that are not within companies, or are individual people who might do contract work or undertake ad hoc work that don't belong to a company. So we can now do that. That has ramifications on a number of elements of the system. We won't cover those today, but what we will cover is gaining consent and managing consent. So you will be aware, hopefully, for most of the people on the call, that a number of elements have now changed within SuperOffice to comply with GDPR. Some people will note that things aren't necessarily happening quick enough. One of the things that we've had feedback on from a few clients is they were hoping that all of the GDPR compliance would have been in place for the new ruling. Unfortunately, that's not been possible, as the massive amount of work which SuperOffice have committed to do is taking an amount of time to get through and check. What they're doing from my point of view is sterling. We regularly see our competitors' products, and we are miles in front of most, if not all, of our major competitors, which is really good news. However, there's still a lot more to do, and we're not shy of that, and we're working towards it at great pace. Okay, so what we want to do is cover off some elements of consent. So I'm on the contact page. I have a contact here who has an email address and other contact information. And what I want to allude to in the first stance is about the source of data. With SuperOffice, we now have a new privacy setting, and the privacy setting records for both the sales and marketing module for e-marketing how consent has been recorded for the legal base of the data. This is very important because we now need to audit, and we must keep an ongoing audit of the source of our data in all of our systems. If all of your systems are connected together, then of course the CRM is probably, in most scenarios, going to be the lead source of the data. In here, we have specified a legitimate interest when the record has been created. And on this particular one, we have then sent a consent form out, and the customers use the customer portal to update it. And I'll go through this in a moment with you. But what I want to emphasize at this early stage is that we can see this information very clearly using this button here that's against every contact in your system once the upgrade's been done, and is recording the privacy settings and for consent. Okay, so what I'm going to do first of all, which is important, is just look at some of the setup here and what is key. So the first thing we have is a new tab in the manager here, which is privacy. This now allows me to create tracking for consent. And in this system, we've created two. One is for the storing of the data, and one is for gaining consent using e-marketing or any other form of customer interaction. Within this privacy setting, we are setting what our default legal base is. Now, we'll see in a minute how we define this list, but for this example system that I'm using, I've defined that legitimate interest is how I'm going to store all of my data. We then have another option here, which is the e-marketing privacy setting. And if you select this option, only persons who have given their explicit consent to receive e-marketing information or who have a subscription, and we'll talk about subscriptions in a moment, will be added to the recipient list in a mailing. So this setting is allowing us to say to the system that if this is active, it will filter and make sure that anybody who has consented and has an active subscription is included within your selections. If they haven't given consent to a subscription, they will be removed. They won't be allowed to go out. So that's a very important setting. You can have as many tracked consents as you want, but as standard, your system will work on 2. And to be frank, so far what we're seeing with most of our clients, 2 is enough. Okay, the next element that I need to cover in order to give you insight is in the list button, you now have 2, and you'll notice all of these have a shield against them with the word privacy. So we have privacy here, and within the list we have 2 privacies. Privacy, legal base. So again, when your systems are migrated or set up fresh, you will notice that you'll get some standards here. In this system, we've got contract consent, we've got a required by law legal base, we've got a protect vital interest, public interest, legitimate interest, and withdrawn. This list is definable by you, and as with all the lists of SuperOffice, can be defined by user group and can have its individual heading. Okay. The next one we have then is the source. So what was the source of the data? Again, a user definable list within SuperOffice can be grouped if you wish to switch on group filtering. Our default one will be the first top of the list, which is created by user. We then have email, incoming request, chat, web form, customer portal, import, other integration, or unknown. If I've ever been involved in training with you, one of my pet hates, I put it here so I could do this, is unknown should never be used. And therefore, didn't expect that to happen. That means it's being used, should be removed. This is a test system, and I always advise users never to have an unknown or other, as everybody will decide to use it. So, just to recap, I've set my privacy settings within my setup. I've then gone into my list and I've created my legal base and my source. You must create these as the first steps. We do this for most people when we do the upgrades. Then we have one other element that we need to look at now, which is subscription types. So on the test system I'm using here, we have a subscription type of invitations, news, promotions, urgent messages, product information, and season's Christmas greeting. Again, this is a test system. We all play with these. The one thing that myself and the team at Synergy have found while we've been using this and starting to use it more and more with clients is that the definition of these subscription types is so important. You've got to give due consideration to what you're trying to achieve here. We've seen clients with subscription lists that are 20 to 30 options. It's far too many and will not get used correctly. What's important, and you'll see this in a little while with a live demonstration that I'm going to do, is that the customer gets to see these. Your customer that you're adding into the system will be able to see these descriptions. So it's very, very important these descriptions are very defined and that you explain what each one is going to do. When Jacqueline put together our email that we send to clients automatically when somebody is subscribed, we explain what an invitation means, what news means, what a promotion means, in order that we've got complete clarity on exactly what each one is going to do for the client's benefit. The other thing, of course, with having a long list is if you have too many options, people become bored. My simplistic view of that for marketing is we don't want to bore them with too many options. So again, let's be aware of that when we're creating this subscription type. Okay, so what I want to show now is the effect of setting those up. So if we go into the system and let's look at John Ramsbottom, was one we created earlier, and I go to the interest tab, what is fundamentally different now that we need to be aware of is that under interest, we now have a segmentation. We have the interests, which is an internal set of fields about John Ramsbottom. And we might be picking out, is he a decision maker? Is he a sales contact? What we then have to the right, and when we do your data upgrades and your system upgrades, we're having to split these very definitively. We now have the e-marketing tab. The e-marketing tab allows us to present what we've already set up within the system manager, the admin. It says, is this person, John, going to get invitations, going to get news, going to get promotions, urgent messages, product information, and season's greetings cards? I might want to select that he gets urgent messages. I just made a manual change now to his requirements. Okay. What happens now, of course, is with me making that change, a decision has to be made. Do I want to email John to say, I've made some changes, can he confirm they're okay? But when I'm setting a customer up or a prospect, am I gaining consent for marketing at the point of setting up their data? So what I'd like to do is just to emphasize that, I'd like to create a new contact within a company. So I'm going to go to a company, Holiday Lighting here. It's all made up companies. For GDPR, of course, we can't demonstrate, even when customers allow us to use parts of their data, we're not allowed to use them anymore. So I'm going to set up here a Mr. Phil Jones. What's his title now? He's head of marketing. I'm going to use an email address, which is a personal email address for me, in order that I can demonstrate this. I'm going to go to interests. I'm going to switch on my marketing tab. I'm going to send him some invitations and news, urgent messages, and product information. I'm not going to send him promotions and Christmas cards. And I'm going to press save. Now, by default, I have selected, and I'll go into more depth with this in a moment, I have selected to send him automatically an email when I've created him on our system. And the email that's now been sent out is this. Using my template definition, I have defined an interactive email which will be sent to Phil. Use a picture of me and my personal information at the top. If I now just jump into my email, that's just arrived in my email inbox. The wording of this is defined by you, but also what's even more important is you can have multiple templates. And I'll explain what we did internally with this in a moment. The important thing is there is a hyperlink here now. Click this link. I'm clicking the link, and automatically I'm now getting access to see what is being stored about me, and I have the opportunity to make any amendments. Now, just before I fill this in, I just want to emphasize something. If I go here and look at the legal base, please note, as I stand now, I've created this contact. So I created it in sales and service. The user was Tony Poole, the date. But my marketing consent was given by me when I created the user, again on the same date and time. What the system has done when I've saved that information is automatically sent this contact the email that I'm now showing you. That is allowing him then or her to select to be able to change. So Phil can now withdraw his consent completely if he wants. He can decide to pick what he wants to be involved in. So he might want a Christmas card, he might want product information, but might not want promotions and definitely not invitations. When Phil confirms this, and this is all web-based, that subscription now has ticked to say it's complete. If I now go back to SuperOffice, I'm going to hit refresh. I will now see, if I press edit, the legal base has now changed for marketing. Still the same for who created it, which was me, but now, and here's the system code, on the 22nd of the 6th, excuse the American date formatting, I've had a consent email from the customer that has automatically, from his selections that he made, updated the system. Okay, so that's really important, just to re-emphasize that the wording of these elements is very important because they're being presented to the customer. This, for the users that we have of eMarketer, will then ripple through to your eMarketer system and will be used by eMarketing, the internal mail shot tool within SuperOffice. So just to recap there, we've created a contact, we've selected to send them marketing information, we've sent them an opt-in or a view email to allow them to see what they're opted into and to allow them to change that information should they wish to. If we are basing all of our contact information on legitimate interest, we may not be basing the fact that we're marketing against consent, but we have gained consent on top of the fact that we've done the legitimate interest. There's loads of legal anomalies within legitimate interest and consent. Each customer, each client of ours has to sort that out as an internal issue. What we're trying to provide, of course, is the mechanisms to answer every different person's way of working or every different business's way of working. So let me just jump back now into the setup. And if we go to lists, you'll all be used to lists, and we go to document templates. There is our confirmation person added email. It's an outgoing email template. You'll notice now there's a new option here, privacy email template. These will all be very important when we start using web forms, when we go to 8.4 and we have the release of web forms, which allows you to share a lot more information with clients directly via web. If I press edit, you've now got a full HTML editor here to create templates and amend templates. So if I can give you a little bit of guidance on this, something which Jacqueline did internally for our marketing, we have two confirmation emails. We have a confirmation email for an existing customer and a confirmation email for a new customer. And the contents and the way that we address the customer or the prospective customer are very different. What we can then do, if we go back now to our other lists, and hopefully everybody's following this, we'll get some questions in a bit, when we look at source, and I'm going to double click here on created by user, we can define that if something is created by a user, we automatically send a confirmation email, and we can select, currently we only have one, but we can select the type of email we send. So in theory, every different source of data can have a different interaction email. What's also important is if we go back, and thank you to everybody who's putting questions up, we'll refer to those in a moment. If we now have the situation here where we have an interest and we might want to make a manual change, I'm actually in a position now where I can, using the task button against the contact, I can send a privacy confirmation email. If I do this, this will allow me to select from my template list to send a one-off email directly to that client, reaffirming the changes I've made and asking them if they want to change anything. Okay, so we could have a template that says here, we've changed your settings, hopefully to meet the needs that we've just discussed on the telephone. Please change anything you wish to. So we can have different emails to do different interaction, which I think is great. For those that are eagle-eyed, I'm not going to use it at present, we now have here the Generate Personal Data Report, which is part of 8.2 R2. Long story, won't go into that one, but we now have the facility to generate a personal data report PDF to send to the client of what personal data we're storing on them. That'll be covered in another Find Out More Friday. Okay, so what I've hopefully done there in 25 minutes is covered off how we set up the different consent levels, how we can now automatically switch on updates to clients, and how we can manually update clients on the changes we've made and either gain consent or just reaffirm with the client what we're storing on them and what we've subscribed them to within our marketing. So what I'm going to try and do now for everybody, and the reason for muting is so that we don't have questions being thrown by everybody at the same time. So I hope this is working. Again, feedback is greatly appreciated. My first chat is from Neil. Neil is saying you've got no mic, right? Thank you. Chris, can you add in translations to the subscription types? My understanding to this, Chris, is that we can, but it is in a future release. It's not here. If I may, I'll get confirmation of when we may see that. Rachel, could you take that down as a question that we can seek the answer to for confirmation for Chris? Thank you for that, Chris. Good question. Becky, does the contact now that it is split still default to the same company category fields, etc. When it is linked to a company, or do staff now have to select these fields twice? Really good question, Becky. No, it does exactly what it did before. It defaults, you create the company, as long as you're creating the person within the company. So here we go, company. We've got our contacts and we press add, then that will default to the company settings. However, Becky, you do have the ability within the separate contacts to say new contact. Okay. Again, that when I pick the company name here, so I'm going to pick Halliday Lighting, you'll notice that changed because it's now linked to a company that is fixed to that company. If, however, I didn't select a company, I now have the ability to categorize them separately. So it's not creating any more work, but it does allow the flexibility if, of course, you've got somebody who's standalone. Becky, I hope that answers your question. Victoria, can we control who can change the legal data in the contact card, as we don't want everybody to be able to change the settings? The answer to this one is fairly convoluted, but the answer is yes, you can protect. The question and debate that's currently going on is the level of protection. We have certain clients who would like to be able to say, this customer gets marketing information and it automatically sends them the consent email for the customer to choose without the company. Now, currently we can't do that. The other thing that we have as a discussion point at present is that you may have a sales team where you want to not allow them, once it's set, to change it. That again isn't possible yet, but is currently part of our discussions within the SuperOffice community in Europe. You can remove the ability for anybody in certain teams to get access to the e-marketing tab. So you can either give it to team members or remove it from team members. What we're trying to do is find some mid-tiers where we can allow certain people to add things but not remove them, or certain people to view but not change. So there are a number of different bits of feedback coming in. Any feedback when you start using the system is appreciated, and all, as you'll know from the past, if you've worked with SuperOffice for a number of years, goes into the community and gets voted on. But you can protect the business by saying only key people in marketing get access to this and everybody else doesn't. So you can protect it. It's the levels of protection that we would like to see expanded in this new facility. I hope that answers your question there, Victoria. A question here from Neil. Thanks, Neil. Can you mass update e-marketing options, i.e. change all contacts in London to only receive urgent messages? Using the new bulk update function, you won't have seen this yet, Neil, until your upgrade's done, but the new bulk update allows us to change literally now anything in the system based on criteria. And that bulk update was a requirement for GDPR, quite a big amount of change within the system, but that is live as in 8.2 and onwards. A question from Chris. Thank you, Chris. Also, when the e-marketing gets turned on, all of the subscriptions get selected. Is this default behavior or can it be unticked? My understanding to date, Chris, is that all will be ticked when you select e-marketing, with the ability then to untick. I haven't been asked that question before, so my apologies. Rachel, could we also, sorry to use you as a note taker here, could we also raise that as a question on the community to ask if there's any kind of coding that can be done within the setup to default to off as opposed to on, or to default certain elements to on and certain elements to off. Chris, thank you for that. Good question. Another question here from Becky. Thank you, Becky. How do we ensure everyone sends that privacy email and does not just cancel and bypass the step or make a change? Good question, Becky. If you set your automatic email to on, then of course the user is going to get no option the second they save that email has gone. If in the first instance, once you've done an upgrade, you want to e-shot all of your clients with that email, we can do that using some of the internal selections to be able to send out a mass email to everybody asking them to change their or review their subscriptions, not necessarily change. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, dependent on your privacy policy and how you're treating data. That may not be the best approach, but I'll make it as a suggestion in any case. Christian, a question there. Thank you. Can these templates emails be sent through eMarketeer? Is it connected? Really, really good question, Christian. The guys at eMarketeer have been waiting with bated breath for the release of 8.3. 8.3 is now live. With 8.3 came the additional web connectors that were needed for eMarketeer to connect in. So the answer is yes, once you're on 8.3, we believe the upgrades are now in place with eMarketeer. They've been ready for some time, but beholden to SuperOffice getting 8.3 ready and out. So the answer is yes, there are templates that can be created in eMarketeer that will feed information directly through to the consent management within SuperOffice. You need to be on SuperOffice 8.3, and that function will be available or is available now. 8.3 was only released early last week or the week before, and there's a revision of 8.3 that's due to be released today. So hopefully we'll be in a position where we'll be able to do a little bit more information on that one very soon. And if you read the updates that Jacqueline sends out, we're putting updates in there very regularly about what's coming in each version. There's Becky there. Thank you again. Does the bulk update function in the new system now include user-defined fields. Yep, the bulk update now includes all fields. There isn't anything, not that we've found as yet, that cannot be updated with the bulk update. It is by definition the whole system. And we have another question here. Thank you, Chris. On eMarketeer, do you need to manually add the subscriptions for them to be synced, or will it be pushed? That's a really good question. I think, Chris, you're picking the questions to challenge me today. I don't know, because we've not upgraded to 8.3 internally. We're waiting for the release that comes out hopefully today. We do have a couple of clients that have gone to 8.3 with it only coming out. I think it was last weekend was the first steps. So I don't know the answer to that. So I'm going to have to come back to you on that, if that's all right, Chris. So you've sent me 3 challenging questions there, and I'll come back to you very quickly with that one. Okay. The meeting is going to stop in a second, so I just want to thank everybody for coming. Any comments on find out more Friday? If you could follow us on Twitter on Synergy Tech UK, or on LinkedIn at Synergy-Technology-Ltd, it would be appreciated. Our hope is to ramp these up and do them regularly every Friday, ongoing, about different subjects within the system.